This is episode 15 of the Latter-day Saint Geeks podcast. I'm Spencer, and in this episode, Joe and I discuss the quality of the original Yu-Gi-Oh! Series, whether it's quality anime or just nostalgia. Welcome to another episode of the Latter-day Saint Geeks podcast. I'm Spencer, and I'm joined today with Joe, the original creator of the blog, but it's his first time on the podcast. So welcome, Joe.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
So we're going to talk about Yu-Gi-Oh! Today and whether it's actually quality anime, the original Yu-Gi-Oh! Series, not the later ones, or is it nostalgia covered garbage like other kids' shows? Garbage is a strong word, but we'll get to that in a moment because we're going to start with recommendations. I've been reading Chronicles of Narnia, The Horse and His Boy, and I know you got your opinions on Narnia, Joe, but I think that probably has more to do with the movies than the books because I don't.
No, it's with all of it,
Oh,
but
okay, but
it's whatever people like. I
yeah,
get it.
yeah. Well, but what I'll say specifically for The Horse and His Boy, it I read it at a particular time between my two stints of serving as a missionary, and it just really like struck my heart in a way of like recognizing or needing to recognize more when the Savior is trying to comfort me. And I can include a link to a blog post I did on this book, but it just the whole idea of like the main character, Shasta, has no idea that Aslan, who's the representation of Jesus Christ, has been guiding his journey the whole way along until the very end. And it's like he has this realization of like I was never alone. Like even when I was depressed and miserable, I was never alone. So I need a bit of that in my life. So
No,
all
that's a
right.
wonderful takeoff.
Yeah. All right. What do you got? What are you recommending?
This week I've been reading American Gods by Neil Gaiman. It is a fascinating cross-country journey by a gentleman who is working for the ancient gods who have traveled over to America through the immigrants who believed in them, and he is trying to help them keep their relevance in the world. It's a fascinating look, though, at Americans, immigrants, a huge thing on the American experience. And I recently found out that Neil Gaiman himself wrote it. He's an immigrant.
Hmm.
He wrote it while doing a road trip through America and would write his experiences with the characters in the places that he visited.
Hmm.
So it is a fascinating look at ourselves as a people, as an American people. It's not especially political or religious, despite the fact that they're, like I said, the gods of all religions are characters in the book.
Mhm.
But it's more like an idea of what do we value as a people? What do people ourselves value? What do we hold on to? And what would we defend? And it is so fun. It is incredible. It is very witty. Neil Gaiman is a amazing. He is an amazing modern fantasy writer. I've loved everything he's written. And yeah, this is one of his lighter works, and I have a lot of fun with it.
Almost sounds like, to very much oversimplify the matter, it almost sounds like Percy Jackson, but instead of for preteens, this is Percy Jackson for adults with adult kind of matters.
Yeah, it is very much Percy Jackson, but for grown-ups.
Yes.
It is a bit. It does have risque bits in it. I will say that.
Yeah,
It
I
does.
was avoiding the word mature for that reason, but I guess maybe it is more mature.
It is far more of a. It is a bit more of a. It has a few moments in it. But like I said, overall though, the book is it's fascinating and it's a fun adventure through America. And I am loving it, hearing it once again. And I actually am listening to it on Audible, where I found the
God, I love Audible.
oh, Audible is life. I love Audible, but I found the 10th anniversary edition, which is fully cast
Ooh.
and includes Neil Gaiman in some portions reading it himself.
Hmm.
So, and his voice is like butter. But I absolutely love that, and I would recommend it to anybody who wants to have just a fun, strange experience traveling through America.
Yeah, that would be pretty strange. So I'll include the Audible link in there since it's so highly recommended. But let's move on to the topic of the day. Um, so back when I was in college, I started rewatching all the Yu-Gi-Oh! Well, I started rewatching the Yu-Gi-Oh! Series on Hulu or wherever it was at the time. Worked my way through the original series with Yugi and his friends. The first spin-off, which I had seen probably about half of before, Yu-Gi-Oh! GX, and kind of nice like Hogwarts plus Duel Monsters feel, with some cameo appearances a couple times of Kaiba and Pegasus and even Yugi at one point or once or twice. Um, but then after that, it goes to Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds, which is known for the motorcycle dueling. Um, and then, which is, but still kind of the same timeline as the previous two, just the city of the future, I guess. Um, but then the two spin-offs after that, Zexal and Arc 5, were, I was telling you a little bit before we started recording, it's like they're parallel timelines, and Arc 5 actually has it as a parallel timeline, but they did it in a really, well, I certainly wouldn't have done it the way that they did, but that's another story. And both after Zexal and after Arc 5, I was just left thinking, are these shows, was this show ever good, or was I just a kid? Um, so I went back and watched the original Yu-Gi-Oh! I'm currently on Yu-Gi-Oh! GX. Um, I made it through the first series and enjoyed it. I'm into the second series and enjoying it. So something's obviously working for me. But our topic today is just, is it nostalgia that's keeping me going, or were there some actually good writing in it? Because we both, you and I have both had animes that have aged well. Like I'd say Digimon and Sailor Moon have aged well with their stories to some extent.
Yeah, yeah. They both have a few. They're showing their age at this point, but they're still
Yeah.
not horrible.
But then there's the others like Pokemon that was like the definition of episodic. So in many ways, I don't feel like that aged well. That one in some ways is more nostalgia, but it's still fun. It's whimsical. It's made for kids, meant for kids. That doesn't mean it's bad. It just means meant for kids. Um, so now the question is, does Yu-Gi-Oh have a decent plot or a good plot, or is it just meant for kids?
So I want to tell a story that recently happened to me with this. I was playing around on my Switch and seeing if there was anything new in the stores that I wanted. And I found Yu-Gi-Oh! Legacy of the Duelist for sale on it. And I was like, oh my gosh, do I want to buy a Yu-Gi-Oh game? I'm in my late 30s. Do I really want to buy a Yu-Gi-Oh card game? And I was looking it up and had great reviews. And there was a part of me that was heeing and hawing about it. And then I happened to look on my Steam list and I'd already bought it for Steam. So obviously somewhere I had no problem buying this game.
Mhm.
So I started playing it again, and what it does is it goes through the series as well. But it does all the major, it tells you all the major plot points, and then all the battles you get to play in the battles. And you can either use the decks that were canonically in the game in the show, or you can use your own decks.
Mhm.
And I found myself
So
just I
pause for
tried
a
to.
second. You're talking about like the original Yu-Gi-Oh, not any of the spin-offs. We're not even touching the spin-offs yet.
Oh no, this is all of them.
Oh, this is
This
all
goes
of
with
them.
all of them.
Okay.
And it has some 10, 20,000 cards in it, which are all like gameplay playable, which is
Right.
unusual for the Yu-Gi-Oh! Because I don't know if you remember the Yu-Gi-Oh! Video games back in the day.
Well, there were some that just wow.
Yep. Just
Like Game Boy
they were
Advance
just
ones, it was just make up its own rules.
yep, made up their own rule. I like the one where you had to like all the cards combined together and you were combining like 6 or 7 cards to get and then you'd get like a blue eyes white dragon from like potted plant and like, you know, dark magician girl and it was just nonsense. But the
I
fact is
still
that
have a Duelist of the Roses, I think is what it's called for PlayStation 2. And I don't know if it's the one you're thinking of, but it's certainly along those lines where I did not know for the longest time about fusions for that game. And I was like, I can do this. And it just made the game like I just breezed through it pretty much after that point.
I remember that one because they were trying to do the War of the Roses from history, but with Yu-Gi-Oh characters. Do you know how much I would love if they did that? If they just took anime characters and redid historical like events? Like I want to see like Hannibal going up the Alps but it's Sailor Moon. Like I would
But
watch
you know,
this.
with the canon of the original Yu-Gi-Oh, that would kind of work as these doppelgangers from history. But
Exactly.
so, but
And
anyways,
the
yeah.
and the fact that I have fond memories of that game and I was sitting here thinking, is when I was playing this game, I was like, is Yu-Gi-Oh still nostalgic? Because I was thinking about this question, and I realized that a lot of the decks I wanted to build and the cards that I was excited to get were the ones that I recognized from the show. Like, I'd get all these cards that I'd never seen before because they were from later sets or they were from later episodes or from different series. And I was like, I don't want to build a superhero deck, but I've got a Dark Magician deck. I've got a Harpy Lady deck. And I've been trying to get the Perfectly Ultimate Machine King card so I could build my machine deck. And I realized there's got to be something to it that I'm still playing. Like the game is fun. Yu-Gi-Oh, the card game is fun. But the
Well, I mean,
fact
it
that
was
I'm not,
been almost 10 years probably that you bought me like cards after for Christmas when
yeah,
after I had lost them in a move. And I still have those cards, I think.
yeah, it's still it holds up as a game. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. But I mean, it still holds up. It's fun. You
I
get the
mean, as
right
much
decks
as like
together.
Pokemon or whatever holds up as a card game.
Exactly,
I
100%.
wouldn't put it on the same tier as like Magic because
Oh,
Magic
don't even.
exists outside of a whole other thing.
Yeah, it exists in its own weird universe. Don't even get me started on Magic the Gathering and where they're going. We'd be here all day. But Yu-Gi-Oh is still a fun card game, but it was interesting to me that I still found myself drawn to the cards that I remember from the show.
Hmm.
And I've got like decks of all my favorite characters had. So I've got well, I still need some of the cards to make my Toon deck and my Thousand Eyes Restrict deck, but I've got a Yugi deck, I've got a Joey deck, I've got a Kaiba deck, I've got a Valentine deck, I've got a Bakura deck, and it's like so there is something about these characters that still rings true. I still like Yugi and I still like Bakura and um Kaiba. In fact, for me, there's another story, but we'll get to that story in a second because we gotta. I'm sure there's other stuff you wanted to say, but no, to me, it does feel like there is a level of there was something to this show and these characters that is still resonating, and it's more than just oh, I liked it when I was a kid. It's still
Hmm.
like there was something to it.
So I guess that's the big question is like, what is this thing that like we're recognizing outside of the nostalgia? Um, I mean, for me, if looking at it from like a writing perspective, like you could say that um, an anime or a show of any sort, I suppose, is only as good as its filler episodes or as good as its villains. or as good as its side characters. And like there are there are some distinct filler episodes in Yu-Gi-Oh! Um, of course, we're talking just about the original series here. The other ones, even Yu-Gi-Oh! GX, kind of it's a conversation for another day. But like instead of, I felt like even in as far as filler episodes, like Yu-Gi-Oh! Made its way to like do filler story arcs that did not exist in the manga, but they were a point A to point B story arc in and of themselves. The Orichalcos, the virtual world, um, Kaiba's grand tournament in America, they were all like, not great or important as far as like the Pharaoh storyline was concerned, but they were still solid story arcs in and of themselves that each episode mattered instead of like in I remember I couldn't tell you which episode it was because I've kind of blocked it out of my system now, but I remember there was some episodes in Yu-Gi-Oh! Zexal that they're in the middle of a tournament and it's kind of Battle City style, like you duel whoever you run into kind of thing. And
Mhm.
he duels this one random girl that I don't know that we'd ever seen before, and I don't remember if we ever saw her again. So it's like, okay, yes, I guess for the point of the tournament, she mattered, but at the same time, in the original Yu-Gi-Oh, those duels were against like Weevil and Rex and Bakura, um, or at the very least, like Rare Hunters or the other characters that were made to, they had something to do with the larger plot instead of just this random girl who has this. I think she might have had like an airplane themed deck or something. I don't even remember, but it was just like, why am I supposed to care about this character? But yeah, so we went from those story arcs, and then even like the villains and side characters in those story arcs. Like I can think of, there was a whole backstory to Kaiba's adoptive father that, in some ways we're meant to feel his pain and the hard times that he went through, sort of. But we like got to like understand his emotions in a way that, he was a side character villain in a like a almost spin-off filler story arc, but we still got some depth to his character. And I think that says something.
Well, and absolutely. I mean, we feel for the Kaiba family as we're like learn more about them, especially after like I think midway through Battle City when we actually start to get more of their backstory. Because we do get some of Kaiba that, we know that he's protective of his brother, and that he's also like, but we also see that he is this weird, he still will resort to like weird villain antagonist level, like when he threatens to fall off the side of the castle.
And then
And it's
somewhere along
like,
the line, he has this like weird thing with his hand to like emphasize his villainness.
oh yeah, no, there's a whole joke. There's a series I watch, and they talk a lot about Yu-Gi-Oh and about the art style of Yu-Gi-Oh, and they talk about the Kaiba hand and
Oh, and
how
Joey's face.
they sometimes talk about Joey's face. They'll usually when they say dragon, they'll go dragon and give it like a Brooklyn accent. But it's that Kaiba hand where every finger is doing something completely different than all the other fingers.
And
And
like something unnatural or something too. I don't know.
yeah, he is wild. Like he gets angry and his hands just lose all control. He is a
Yeah.
but we love him for it. But it is like, yeah, these characters that were even the side characters still were interesting. If they weren't interesting, they were fun.
Yeah.
Like one of my favorites is Duke Devlin.
Oh yeah. If anything was a filler episode, it was his like 4 or 5 episode story arc after Duelist Kingdom, and it's just this one-off character, but then all of a sudden appears during Battle City.
Yeah, and he's just kind of there. He's apparently got a deck. He's invented his own card game based on the dual monsters, and it's a dice game for some reason. And he's so weird, and
Mhm.
he makes no sense. And but he's so fun.
Yeah. Well, and the one that comes to my mind is this one. Um, she's like the Chinese champion from Kaiba's Grand Championship, like in the second to last story arc of the series. And
Hmm.
she is the fangirling over Yugi, who's like 2 feet shorter than her, and like all but kidnaps his grandpa to lure Yugi into a duel with her so that she can go on a date with him. It's like even this, she only has like 2 duels in the whole story arc, and one of them it's like a side story to the action. Like you only see bits and pieces of her duel with Yugi, well, whatever main storyline duel is going on elsewhere. And yet at the same time, it's like she's fun and she's like, just a completely absurd. And the way she interacts with, you know, Taya and their friend Rebecca, like just it makes the absurdity of it enjoyable.
Oh yeah, no, that's the thing. All these characters that are so
Plus, she had like a Dragon Lady card that would be amazing with my dragon deck. It was like you discard a certain whatever number of dragons, and it gets like a power up based off of all that, like powerhouse Dragon Lady.
that was the other thing about the show that was fun was that their version of duel monsters made absolutely no sense because they had cards that broke this rule or like what was the one where they had to use dragon turtle to shoot a dragon at the flotation ring to make the castle fall.
Oh, Duelist Kingdom was crazy stupid. Like the rules made no sense. Like because the field power bonus was like this random percentage increase of their power, and yeah, like the Yugi attacked the moon in one. But yeah, he literally attacked a moon card, like a spell card
Yeah,
during.
you could attack spell cards, you could play
Like it
weird
got a little
cards.
more standardized in Battle City, but yeah, during Duelist Kingdom, it was like anything goes.
And it was as wild as it was still it was still so entertaining to see this. Like I loved Pegasus's deck because his deck was so bizarre and entertaining. And he had all these tricks, like when he used Thousand Eyes Restrict and could take other people's monsters and use them against them. And it was always a thrill to see the blue eyes come out. And but no, I think that there was these characters were so over the top but they were still grounded in this weird reality of like we've all like especially for those of us who grew up when magic was coming into vogue and when Pokemon was coming into vogue and when this was such a huge thing and there were kids on the playground who were dueling each other and it felt so epic and to see
Did
these
you
characters.
ever have a dual disc toy?
I never had a dual disc toy.
I had two. And I was so mad when like the first one like broke, only to the extent that like it wouldn't like do the like thing where goes from like its neutral standby position to the dual position. It was stuck in the dual position, and I was so mad.
Oh jeez. Well, they
I
were
mean,
cool looking because Battle City was cool.
yeah.
And that idea that you had this arm device that you could play your cards on, like that was such a fun visual. Everything about
Mhm,
it made the card game feel like the way we were feeling when we were playing Magic and Pokemon and eventually Yu-Gi-Oh!
mhm.
That these were these big epic battles with all this at stake and it was so over dramatized and yet it I think there's something still to that because even to this day when I'm playing a board game I get into it even if I'm
Yeah.
just either I'm goofing around or I was playing a game earlier with my wife and we were it was a game where we're little animals building a village or something I don't know but we were just like we get into it because if a good game makes you feel like you're in this epic moment
Well, and I
and I think
think I think one thing just to make it feel like you're in the moment is that, Yu-Gi-Oh was like based in our world.
Yeah,
I had
exactly.
that feeling with the Digimon Tamers show, where the first two seasons of Digimon were a TV show in that season, and they had the same card game that I had. I didn't know how to play it, but I had some of the same cards, and I was like, this TV show could be my reality should
Hmm.
this mythology exist in real life.
And I think that's where things get harder as like Yu-Gi-Oh, like you said, it moved into now we're in this other future. Now we're in an alternate timeline. Now we're
Yeah.
dueling on motorcycles. It's like it lost its groundedness. And this is something like we play with our friends. We
Yeah.
can't like
Like
as
even
full
the
grown
Duel
adults, it's not like we
Academy one, even the Yu-Gi-Oh! GX with the Duel Academy, it's like imagine going to a dueling school and it's still present day-ish. Like, but it's still like if this school existed, I could enroll there. This is the same world that I live in. And then you jump forward 20, 50 years, whatever it is, in 5Ds and playing on motorcycles and it all goes out the window.
and it's all just it just becomes noise and nonsense is the problem. And I think that's why there is such I think you're right, there is such a nostalgia to that because it feels like it could have been our world. I mean, obviously there's like extremes to it. I mean, but I always wanted though, I always wanted one of the Millennium pieces, like even to this day, if I'm at a convention or whatever and someone's selling like knockoff like a Millennium Eye or like a Millennium Puzzle, this little part of my goblin
Yeah.
brain that's like, should I get a Millennium
Oh,
Puzzle?
definitely. Well, even just with, I'm at the point in, you said you hadn't really watched anything past Yugi, but in Yu-Gi-Oh! GX, in the Millennium items have been blocked away for years by that point. But there are these little, they call them shadow charms, and they're like, the little brothers to the Millennium items, where they still have some shadow magic, but they're kind of low key. And even to have something like that would be like, if I found one of those at a convention, even I'd be like, yes.
Oh yeah. And I think that in the end that shows that something has survived long enough that we care about it to the point where as adults we're going to buy hideous useless jewelry from a show we watched as kids because we still have that feeling of oh my gosh, it's like it's in the show. And I
I
think
mean,
that
it's for
is
that reason that my phone case is Digimon from the latest Digimon movies.
oh, everything I own. You
Oh,
know?
yes, yes.
Yeah, everything I own. And yeah, we don't have viewers, we have listeners. My camera has like thousands of little like knickknacks and things I've painted and stuff because I am still living my childhood.
Yep.
So someone described me today as a big kid. But yeah, no, I see this stuff and I'm like, oh my gosh, yeah, I gotta have it, you know. So I think that the I think Yu-Gi-Oh! The original series, the original run, when Yugi was still the main protagonist.
Protagonist.
Sorry, caffeine had fell apart. Um, that was when the series was still good with some of the stuff that when they went into the school. And I think it holds up as a show. I mean, obviously there's going to be like it doesn't make the game doesn't make sense. Some of the characters are a little over dramatic like but but that all got addressed it when they did the abridged series. They were able to do a critique, you know. Oh, so I ripped up this card so it can never be used against me. What are you talking about? So you're just gonna rip up every card ever so they can never be played against you? Like, you're right. You know, it's dramatic in when you're watching it. You're going, "Oh, he ripped up that expensive blue eyes." Oh, but then when you stop and think about it, you're like, "Yeah, would he just rip up all the cards? Like, he's an idiot."
You got to rip up a lot of stuff, and a lot of things, a lot of logic on television breaks down if we think about it for too long.
But the point is, do you want to break the logic down, or was it cool enough that he was willing to like destroy the card? And if he was willing to
Yeah.
destroy the card, that's cool, you know. So
Well, it was not cool, but but it fed into
it's a
his
good story
character.
beat.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
it definitely told you what kind of person he was and developed his character really fast.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. No, we knew where Kaiba stood on the alignment chart right there. And as the show progressed, we got to see more of his motivation as to why he was like the way he was and what he truly cared about. Because they could have made him like they could have made any of the villains like these, pyramid of evil, snickering villains, but each one of them had a backstory as to why they're doing what they're doing. And that's what made the show, that's what made all the villains so cool.
Like I'm trying to think it through all of them, and like literally, I think the only one that there are like two that I can think of that kind of were just bad for the sake of bad to some extent, but it was more bad for the sake of greed, which even that is more of a reason than just I want to take over the world.
Exactly. And because it was like, we found out Pegasus was trying to collect all the Millennium items because he had a thought that it would bring back his dead wife. And Kaiba was just kind of like caught in the middle of this like corporate war where he was
Hmm.
just trying to keep it so that him and his brother could stay alive and be safe. But it took the money to do that. In order to deal with this money, he had to do these stupid public appearances and do all this. And then he'd get then
Even Bakura, you get the backstory for him in the last story arc and in a movie that I did not fully enjoy. That's a different story, which I've already written a review about. But even Bakura, you get the backstory of this is why he's so evil. It's his village was slaughtered by the pharaoh's priests. Like, yeah, that's going to be traumatizing, and yeah, you're most people are going to be kind of vengeful about that kind of thing.
exactly. Real quick, I did want to tell the story that why I still like to me the proof that Yu-Gi-Oh still matters to me. Besides the I got excited to buy a video game during the pandemic. When it started, there was this video came out because I watched these artists on YouTube who do artist challenges, and they did a challenge where they'd take an anime character and draw that anime character in a different anime style. And my favorite artist on this show drew Seto Kaiba in the Berserk style, which, if you don't know what Berserk is, it is every tiny little detail on every tiny little thing in the room is detailed. And the guy went extreme whenever he drew the Berserk. Well, this gal did it the same way. She gave the same treatment to Kaiba and the Blue Eyes White Dragon.
You'll have to send me this picture so I can put it in the show notes because I need to see this now.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely glorious. And I decided that's what I want to draw. That's how I want to draw. And I've spent the last several years learning how to draw like that. And it's led me to now I can call myself a professional artist. So, and it was inspired partially by Seto Kaiba because I thought it was so cool to see Kaiba look like this.
Yeah. So, all right. I feel like there's only one proper way to wrap this up at this point. It's time to duel.
Time to duel.
Thanks for listening to the Latter-day Saint Geeks podcast. Intro and outro music was provided by David Schradell. You can follow us on most social media platforms, including Facebook and Instagram. You can follow the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube.